If you're just starting out in photography, you've probably already realized that editing your photos can take just as long, if not longer, than actually shooting them. And when you're trying to learn Lightroom, it can feel like there are hundreds of sliders and tools and panels pulling you in every direction. But here's the truth, you don't need to master every single feature to edit beautiful photos fast. You just need to know where to start. And that's exactly why the new adaptive color profiles in Lightroom are such a game changer, especially for landscape photographers. This is one of the simplest ways to speed up your editing process, stay consistent with your style, and make your images look way more professional, even if you're still new to photo editing. So let's break this down step by step. What adaptive color profiles are, how to use them, and why they'll become one of your first go-to tools in Lightroom. Let's start with just the basics. When you import a raw photo into Lightroom, it's usually very flat. The colors are dull, the contrast is low, and it doesn't look anything like what you saw with your naked eyes, and that's normal. Raw files they're designed to hold information, not style. Traditionally, you'd spend time adjusting things like white balance or contrast, shadows, highlights, vibrance, tone curves, and it can take a while to even get remotely close to the final result you hope for. But adaptive color profiles do a lot of that work for you automatically. And these profiles are built to analyze your photo and apply a base look that enhances color, enhances light and tone specific to your scene. And this is the most important part of it all. Adaptive color profiles are not just generic presets or profiles, it's adaptive. It changes depending on the image you're working on. So this is a really great example here. So if you're wondering how to access these, you can come up here to the profile browser and just click these 4 squares right here. And this right here is gonna open up all of the raw color profiles here. So if I come down here to Adobe Raw, you'll see all of these different profiles you can select from. So this is Adobe Color, which is kind of the standard that most people use. Adobe Landscape, Adobe Neutral, Adobe Portrait, Adobe Standard. And you can see these just very subtle variations throughout. Just very subtle differences as I kind of toggle these through each one as I move them around. And there is a ton of these different color profiles here. Camera matching, you have the artistic right through here. I won't go through all of these, but there is a ton of different ones to play around with. But now you will see something that's called adaptive right here. And watch what happens when I hover over adaptive color. Look at that change there. And there's also an adaptive black and white as well. So a huge difference compared to the other profiles we were doing. So let me go back up here to the profile browser, or exit the profile browser and come up here to profile. And now it's set at Adobe Portrait. This is landscape, this is color, and that is usually the default that most people are editing on. But when I move this to adaptive color, look at that difference right there. Just a quick heads up before I forget, I just updated my raw color profile guide and it now includes the latest information on Lightroom's new adaptive profiles. It's a free PDF guide you can download and it breaks down what each profile does and when to use it. Super helpful cheat sheet to keep handy while you edit your photos at home. Just click the link in the description below to grab your copy today. So as you can tell, that was a huge difference when we switched this over to adaptive color. And what's really cool is you have this amount slider here now, so you can tune it up even higher. You can kind of dial it back a little bit. I generally like to dial it back to maybe around 80 as a starting point. But as you can see, none of the sliders were adjusted here. And that's kind of the difference. That's why it's really not a preset. It is a profile. It's not making any physical slider changes. These are all underlying changes here. So once I have that selected, I can just kind of bring down the highlights to show some of the detail in that water. Maybe bring back that white point just a little bit, add a little bit of contrast here, and look at that. Let's toggle this on and off. So this is before, this is completely raw, and after, this is completely raw and after. And what a world of difference in just a matter of a couple seconds, really. Maybe in total, less than 30 seconds to make this kind of an edit, and it is a huge difference. Now, another common question I hear about in regards to the adaptive color profiles is how is this different than the auto section, or I should say the auto button inside of Lightroom? And I got a good comparison of this right here. So this image right here, let's just go ahead and switch this. As you can see, the profile is at Adobe Color. There is no adjustments here. And I did forget to mention this. You have to have a RAW file to use the adaptive color profile. So you want to make sure it is a RAW file, not a JPEG file. So this is a RAW file. I'm going to come up here and I'm going to select adaptive color. Let's see what's happening. Huge difference. It looks much, much better. There is no changes done to the underlying sliders. Got another copy of this right here. Once again, this is that raw file. And let's come up here and let's select auto. And now look what happened. It did make the image look a little bit brighter, but you can see all of these adjustments were made to the image. Now let's compare the two, and this is where things get really, really interesting here. So let's come up here, survey mode. This image on the left is the one with the adaptive color profile, and the image on the right is the auto. And let's just find an area. Look at this right here. Look at how much better controlled the image with the adaptive color profile is in versus the auto. The auto looks absolutely blown out up through here. There's much more detail. The highlights look much more controlled in the adaptive color profile. There's another section here that's very interesting. Look at these houses here. The sunlight hitting these huts right through here is much brighter than it is in the adaptive color. The adaptive color version looks much more controlled. The sky, let me go up here to the sky. The sky looks definitely more colorful, more detail in the sky. Everything about the version with the adaptive color looks better than the automatic version. And I found that to be super, super interesting right there as well. So as you can see, there's a huge difference from using the auto selection tool versus, I don't know if that was the best way to say, the auto button versus the adaptive color profile one. The auto button actually makes changes to the slider. So it's not a profile. It's just kind of going in and making adjustments based off of what Lightroom thinks is the best move. But the adaptive color profile is doing a lot of that work underneath and doesn't make any changes to the actual settings. That pretty much leaves that up to you. Here's another crazy example. Look at this just super underexposed photograph from the Faroe Islands. Let me hit develop up here and let's bring this back up to adaptive color and look at this change. Absolutely massive change. I'm gonna come up here to the amount slider. I always like to bring it back to somewhere around 80 to start with. And then let's just reduce those highlights a little bit. Maybe add a little bit more contrast there. And look at that. Before, and after. Maybe I can bring up this amount slider again a little bit to about right there. But as you can see, what a huge difference. It opened up the shadows, it made the colors a little bit better, put more detail in the sky. Even this area where the sun was setting, where there's just a little bit of warm glow, looks more enhanced. The water looks better. The adaptive color profile actually went in and analyzed this specific photo and made adjustments just for this photo. And that is really, really powerful. And Lightroom does a really good job of that as well. I've got another good example right here from the Dolomites in Italy. As you can see, Adobe Color is selected. Let's drop this down and come up here to adaptive color. Let's select that. Once again, much better. Let's bring this back to around 80 to start with. And I might bring those highlights down just a little bit more. Let's add a little bit more contrast to about right there. Maybe just increase that exposure just a touch. Actually, before I do the exposure, let me just bring back the adaptive color a little bit more. I might not even need to adjust the exposure at all to about right there. And let's toggle this on and off. So this is before and after, before and after. A huge difference. Just for a little bit of fun here, let's just reset this and let's just hit auto and see what that does. Auto did an okay job. You can see that it made all the adjustments right through here, but the sky definitely looks better with the adaptive color version right through here. Oh, that's a good point here. I just kind of stumbled upon this. You can't, or I guess I shouldn't say you can't. Lightroom does not recommend you use adaptive color and then hit the auto button, or hit the auto button and then use adaptive color. It's kind of a one or the other kind of a thing. So let me just hit cancel that. Let's reset the whole photograph. And then let's come up here and come over here and hit auto. And you can see that difference. It made a somewhat similar of an adjustment, but the sky definitely looks better when you do the adaptive color version here. And the overall colors down here look a little bit better too as well. So a real quick video on the power of adaptive color. It is, I think, an amazing step forward, especially for those who are just getting started with photo editing. One of the biggest struggles I used to have when I first started with photography, and one of the biggest struggles I hear other beginners mention is that they don't know where to start when they're editing a photograph. They don't know exactly what are the first moves they should do. This adaptive color profile is an absolutely amazing way to jumpstart things, and then you can just make a couple tiny little bit of refinements. And honestly, you can just leave it there, and that is an amazing way to really start getting used to editing photos. So I think that the new adaptive color profiles in Lightroom are a huge step forward for photo editing, and I wanted to make sure that I share that information for all of those out there that are not familiar with it yet. If you have any questions about anything covered in this week's video, please leave those in the comment section below, and I will do my best to get back in touch with you as soon as humanly possible. And if you did enjoy this week's video, if you could give it a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel if you're not subscribed already, and as always, I really do appreciate you carving out a little bit of time to spend it with me here today, and I will see you all next Wednesday. Bye.